This community 30 years ago, economically, was deprived.
What it was like, a lot of drugs, a lot of crime. It wasn't the safest place to be.
There was a thirst and hunger for health care in this community because they had really no place to go. They didn't have the finance, they didn't have medical insurance, they didn't have the education, there was a language barrier.
And the whole movement of community empowerment in healthcare began. And Betances was an early advocate of community control of services, and particularly patients taking on more responsibility for their care.
This is a grassroots organization that grew out of the community's needs, and you have generations literally who come and utilize this center.
Big breaths.
To gain a patient here is literally to gain a patient for life.
What is a community health? What does that have to do with the health of the community? That the information, the education, the attempts to alter behavior patterns in people is what will ultimately make a healthy community.
It was the days of activism and radicalism and hope and taking things into your own hands and producing something of your own. Those things were still possible, which was a glorious time to actually be a creative thinker so that you can have a vision. Together, my late husband, Paul Ramos, and I decided to raise money to buy a mobile health van to serve the people of the Lower East Side.
Paul was a visionary, great ideas, strong commitment. His passion was contagious. He just became this figure in community health care. I mean, everyone knows Paul Ramos and know what he stood for.
There's actually a picture of him as a knight on a horse, sort of like in medieval times. And that's exactly what he was. He was a fighter. If he believed it was the right thing to do, he would stand by it, whether he was the only one or he had the community's backing. But his voice was heard.
He was the right person at the right time, incredible energy, incredible perseverance, and a conviction that healthcare was really a right that everyone had.
And that no one should be denied healthcare regardless of their position in society. It's no accident that Betances is named Betances. Betances is a 19th century figure who was a doctor in Puerto Rico who believed very strongly in universal healthcare in the 19th century.
And for that, he was punished. And so we decided that's what we would name the clinic. We received $10,000, bought a 27-foot-long van, and began parking on street corners. I was the driver.
We were doing screening for so-called hippies. I don't know if anyone remembers hippies anymore, that we were screening for venereal disease.
Many of these young people were uninsured and were engaged in all kinds of experimentation. So the van that went around to do screening to be able to identify and do case finding very early.
We realized that there wasn't a whole lot of focus on the general population, and that was largely the Latino population.
So Paul redirected his attention and that of the founders who were here then to take what they learned and apply it to the long-standing residential population.
So we went from the stage of having it be just out of the mobile van to a rented space on Essex Street. We were right above a pickle factory where they have those barrels of wonderful smelling pickles that I grew up with as a child.
The neighborhood has really changed a lot since we were here.
This is the entrance to the building now. It looks very, very different.
We decided to try to figure out how we could bring services to the community. which meant going through the process of how do we even start a clinic? How do we get incorporated? How do we get Medicaid reimbursement?
If you look in those two windows, that was the office we used to sit in. Paul and I did a lot of our healthcare planning right in that place.
The board of directors was very instrumental in helping. We had a lawyer, Betty Elder, who really helped us to get incorporated. And we went on this flight to really try to raise money.
When we decided to do primary care, we had to find a space that would allow us to do that. And we developed a relationship with Bertram Beck, good friend and mentor. And he gave us one of Henry Street's buildings on 281 East Broadway for $1 a year.
I don't know exactly how Bert and Paul met, but they bonded very early. My husband felt very strongly about Paul's vision for Betances, and when a building was given to Henry Street Settlement, it was offered to establish a more permanent facility on East Broadway.
Bertram Beck really embraced what we were doing and guided us in many ways in terms of how to get grants. He taught me not only how to dream, but how to make my dreams come true.
This place will always be very special and dear to us because this was our first home.
At times, I remember the waiting room would get so crowded because it was so small. But it was just a family atmosphere, and the doctors were just wonderful, and they continued to care for me from then on.
Families in the area needed health care, and they would go to Betances. And Beth Israel was around to help. We provided them with support in terms of clinicians, sending doctors down here to make sure that certain specialties were available to the patients on site, and they quickly outgrew the space.
When we decided that we should move, Sloan Supermarket had some space available, and we took a little piece on the end and moved our pediatrics and our nutrition program to that facility. As Sloan's moved out, we took it piece by piece by piece.
They finally were able to expand into a space that was all on one floor. I didn't have to climb the stairs anymore or squeeze more people into the nooks and crannies of a house. Not only did they want to provide the best care, but they also wanted it to be in the best possible environment.
Paul was the last person to leave this building, and I remember the only way we could get him out of here was to finally cut off his phone.
Paul never did anything halfway. He did everything with 100% of his energy and his heart, and this was his dream, to have this place be beautiful for his people.
Back in the graffiti era, our building was white, of all things, a graffiti person's dream, and the building was completely covered with markers, spray paint, murals. Once we did our exterior renovation, we painted it. No one has ever marked up the wall ever again. And they spread the word. You don't write on that building. That's a community health center. You don't do it.
I had no idea the grand scale of the renovations until, it took me behind some plastic or some door that was back there in one of the Christmas parties, and it was like that whole space. That waiting area was just exposed wires and beams and things just hanging down. And it was like massive. I couldn't even conceive of what the space was gonna look like, but this was his baby.
He passed away very suddenly. We knew that he would want us to be strong, and so we were. And we really didn't miss a beat.
The reason we all came here was because he brought us here, and the last thing in the world he wanted for us to do was fall apart and give up.
We had some unfinished projects, one being the renovation of the facility, and when he passed away, I helped Wanda, and we finished his dream. And not only did he leave this legacy behind, he also has a street named after him. And to this day, we have an annual block party celebrating not only the renaming of his street, but also just celebrating with our community that we serve.
the community just loves that. They come out, they become part of it, they become part of Sense It, and they feel a sense of association with the Sense It, and that's a great thing.
I think that's really the spirit of Paul Ramos. That's the spirit of respect for the individual. And then when you come to Betances, you're treated like a human being. I think that's amazing.
There's a thread of continuity and a soulful thread that really emanates throughout the center. You feel the spirit of the commitment and of the mission here.
It speaks a lot to the culture of this organization, I think, and what we've built and what it means to work here. And I know that even though Paul's not with us anymore, I'm sure he's watching and he's very proud of what we've done.